Well, welcome to the Marketing Guides for Small Business. This week we have Ryan Englin from Core Matters LLC as our guest. We'll learn from Ryan how to implement a complete process that will attract good people to open jobs that you have at your company. Now, a little bit about Ryan. Since 2011, he has been the CEO of Core Matters, and his company focuses on the issues of high turnover or high growth, along with what businesses need to do to fill their open positions. And not simply fill them, but systematically fill them with quality frontline workers. In prepping for this podcast, I found a neat quote on his website, and it says, "Finding good employees doesn't work. Instead, start attracting top talent." So I thought that was pretty great. We'll get started, and I'll have Ken start us off with the first question.
All right. Well, thanks, Ryan. So the first question is simply, why is hiring so hard? Before you answer that, I also would like for you to kind of talk about whether or not you think it's important for businesses to start to either shift part of their marketing budget from acquiring leads to, to actually increase their sales of their business, and shifting that toward recruiting and marketing, or recruiting and hiring, I should say, or even creating brand new investments really focused on marketing specifically tied to hiring and recruiting.
All right. So two questions.
Yeah.
Let me answer the second one first.
Okay.
The one about advertising and having the budget for recruiting. So what I found is that you can advertise all day long and promote all day long for customers, and it never once helps you with recruiting. But if you just change the way you think about your message and the way you promote those ads and where you advertise them, you can actually create ads that will help you with recruiting and help you with customer acquisition. There used to be a HVAC contractor out here where I'm out in Phoenix, and he used to have this radio commercial talking about how awesome their team was and the kind of training they gave their team, and the how clean the guys were when they came in the house, and how much they respected the homeowner and all this other stuff. And it was like the conversation was, this is what we invest in our people. This is how we invest in our people. This is how we make our people top class. And the whole thing was a customer acquisition radio spot, because the homeowner's sitting there going, I want a guy like that in my living room. I want a guy like that help me fix my AC. And it was really interesting for me. I mean, this was almost a decade ago, but it really got me thinking, you can use advertising to attract good talent and good customers. And so a lot of what we do is around marketing, which is going to be how we answer the second question. I think hiring is really hard for two reasons. Number one, most people give recruiting to the HR team. The people focused on compliance and following the rules, which is almost like a cardinal sin when it comes to marketing. Like, no, you need to break the rules. You need to challenge assumptions. You need to be different. That's not what HR is good at. HR is good at following the rules. And so what we need to do is we need to take recruiting away from the HR department, and we need to give it to the marketing team, because they're the ones that know how to attract people. So that's one of the reasons it's so hard, is we haven't made that shift as employers into what we really need to do to stand out in today's competitive marketplace.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, just kind of tangentially related to that, I've worked with a couple of promotional products companies, and, sometimes they create promotional products for the marketing department, but, at the same time, the HR departments have started to increase their own marketing budgets, because they need to do things. They have to be careful because of the language and whatnot around it, like employee recognition and, but spiritware and things like that that just kind of build that team. So it's still divided between those two departments. At least there's some recognition in some way that marketing needs to become a part of this.
Yeah.
So how would an organization facilitate that transition from HR to marketing?
Well, I think one of the key pieces for any company right now is the job ad, that job posting that they put on the job boards, they put on their website and everything else. And if you look at it, it really looks, it's just a bullet list, right? It almost looks like a maintenance schedule for an automobile. Imagine if one of the automakers was putting together the maintenance schedule and that's what they were paying for a Super Bowl commercial. No, they don't do that. They make it sexy and fun and exciting and like, I want that lifestyle, so I'm going to go buy that car.
Right.
But what we do in HR is we put together the maintenance schedule. We put it out there. Here's all the things you're going to do. Here's all the things we want you to do. And here's how we're going to pay you. And then we're disappointed because they don't work. So I think one of the easiest ways to do it is tell the HR team, you're done writing the job ad. We're going to give it to the marketing team and let them write the ads. Now, to your point, you do have to educate them on what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say.
Right.
But it's not as hard as a lot of people would have you believe.
Okay.
It reminds me a little bit, Ryan, of when I was in the corporate world and our internal, we were big enough corporations that we had internal legal teams as well. And so even just you talking about kind of the protectionism of the HR department, sometimes we would have that from a marketing side where if the legal team wasn't great, they would try to ram the rules down the marketing department's throat. But if they were a great legal team, they would just advise and say, here's the potential challenges you might have with that. Here's how it puts the business at risk. But ultimately, you can still go ahead and do that because you need to push the envelope. So it's probably a similar relationship with the HR departments.
Yeah. I mean, definitely HR is closer to legal than they are any other department in the company. So yes.
Question for you. What is something most businesses are doing wrong when it comes to hiring?
So all of our work is in the trades. So we work with a lot of blue collar companies. I don't want to make assumptions about other industries, although I do know what I'm about to say will carry over. I think a lot of people have forgotten that this is a relationship, that it's an employee-employer relationship. And a lot of employers have the mindset, no, you work for me. And in exchange for your time and your talents, I give you money. And they make the relationship very transactional. And there's nothing else connecting the employer or even the job seeker to your company, to your brand, to your team. And if you've heard the saying before, people don't leave jobs, they leave people. They leave managers, they leave bosses. I mean, that's been said enough that most people know it. So if we know that's true, we need to move away from this transactional relationship of you give me time, I give you money, to we're in a relationship together. And we need to understand that when I hire you, I take on all of your hopes, your goals, your dreams, your drama at home, your health problems. Like I take on all of that stuff. And if we're going to have a relationship that's going to be something that's going to last a long time, we need to be able to have those conversations and be able to modify our relationship to adapt to those things.
It's almost like we've taken on the term team, at least to me anyways, has a very community oriented focus. It's all about helping each other achieve a goal together. But as we look to, I'm even wondering whether a lot of companies have taken on the popular way that professional sports now runs, where it is more transactional, right? You have your team until, it doesn't fit the guy's, salary level, or he, has relational problems and he just leaves, right? Or
Yeah.
the same thing can happen from both sides. But I'm wondering if that's what's kind of invaded even our philosophy of what a team is, because teams should be a very collaborative, helpful, let's do this together, guys. We can, right? But
yeah. It reminds me from a movie I watched years ago, and there was a line in there. It was a sports team they were talking, and the line was something like they were arguing about why the players don't care about winning, why the players don't care about the team. They seemed very individualized and like focused just on themselves. And there was a line in the movie that, do you care that Brad's going through a divorce? Do you care that John, his kid isn't doing well in school? Do you care? And it just went through this list of all these personal things that all these players had. And the coach was like, no, I don't care. They're like, well, until you care, they're not going to care about the team. Because most people do not work to live. Like work is to provide for our lives. And we do it just enough so that we can take care of the things at home and the things that we care about.
Well, Ryan, you know, we're in a very unique job market right now. So how can small businesses compete for some of the best people, especially when they might be competing against bigger businesses that they can offer benefits and things that a smaller business can't?
Yeah, I think there's two things to that. So the first one is, and the marketers on this call, which is everybody, is going to love this, but the internet leveled the playing field. Right? Sure, you can't compete with their big box budgets, and as a small business, you may not be able to have television commercials in the Super Bowl and whatever, but you can have a really solid social media account. You can have a really attractive website. You can write really effective job ads. I think the biggest challenge for small businesses is that they don't know how to play the recruiting game as it goes online. They don't know how to compete with those big brands on social media or on the job boards or through their website. And so if you can stand out, which is really a lot of what we talk about, is how do you be different when it comes to recruiting? You can take on those big guys. And don't get caught up in the misperception that just because a small business doesn't have health benefits or a solid 401k, that there aren't perks to working for a small business. There are a lot of advantages to working for a small business that you will never get working for those big box companies. So don't get caught up in that idea that there isn't something to offer, but you have to be really clear on what that is. It might be flex time, which is a lot easier to do if you're a small business. It might be that you have relationships and you can help people with career path a lot more than you can with large businesses. It might be that, there's really an opportunity to grow within the small business. As the company grows, you can take on more responsibility and do things. And in large corporations, that might not always be true. It's much more of a pecking order in the politics when you get into those large businesses that you don't have with those small companies.
So
Definitely.
Ryan, from a employee perspective versus a contractor perspective, is there any difference there, when you're trying to hire people? I mean, in some cases you might need to go out and get some subcontractors to fill a particular job or something like that. So it sounds to me like a part of what you're talking about too is really organizational culture and getting everybody to buy in, having consistent messaging, making sure that everybody knows what the business is trying to accomplish, what their value propositions are, what their talking points are.
Yeah, so there's definitely a need for contractors, as long as you're doing it right and you're not hiring contractors just to avoid taxes or some of those things. But there's definitely a need for when a small business could take on a contractor, especially if they take on a big job, might last a month or so. They can get some extra guys in, and that way you don't have to hire them and then lay them off. But my belief, back to relationship, right? One of the biggest reasons that companies are hiring so much right now is not because they're growing at these astronomical rates. It's because they're turning over their people. And so what's happening is they might have 100 employees today and they need to get to 105, but 15 just left. So there's this huge need for them to hire, but they only needed 5 people. If they would have just kept those 15, they'd only need 5.
Right.
And what's happened is there's been a lot of that mindset of, we're in the gig economy, so I'll just hire contractors. But when it comes to commitment, which is what we're talking about here, I mean, people are committed to each other. Think about relationships. Which one shows more commitment? We can see other people, or we're going to be exclusive. Right. So that commitment is what's lacking when we start thinking about contractors. And we can't be upset because they're seeing other people. They might decide they like someone else and they want more of their work and less of yours. So don't be disappointed if you go the contractor route and it doesn't work out for you.
Well, also, I think you can, you're limited in your ability to tie compensation and rewards to contractors versus employees. I mean, you should be looking at, when the business is doing well, it should flow down to the employees and they should have incentives to make the business successful. I think that's part of, it's a two-way relationship. It's not just a one-way relationship.
Absolutely.
So why is hiring for the trades so difficult? I mean, I know that there are certain trades that have certifications or apprenticeships that you have to go through, like plumbers or electricians or HVAC. But then there are other, trades like painters where maybe it's a little less rigorous, where maybe they can create their own programs, and maybe creating that program is a differentiator and why somebody might want to go to work for them. So just talk a little bit about that if you could.
Yeah. So there's really no one absolute, this is what happened and why the trades are so hard. But I'll let you know where I'm coming from on this. You remember at the end of the 90s, and there was this thing called the internet that was getting some buzz, and the newspapers and the book publishers were like, no, it's not going to hurt us. Right. And the newspapers kept printing papers, and all of a sudden the newspapers start going out of business at the turn of the century. I feel like the trades have had that same mindset when it comes to knowledge work. See, there's always been a skill shortage. There's a paper from the 60s that I have that talks about the skilled labor shortage for typists.
Wow.
And why it's a problem. I mean, that we're talking 60 years ago, the skilled trades have always struggled to hire. But what happened was in the 90s and the early 2000s, knowledge work came into play. And boy, was it sexy and cool and something you wanted to tell your parents, I'm going to be a computer engineer and I'm going to be the next, Mark Zuckerberg, and I'm going to do all this startup stuff. And parents got excited about it. And parents are like, I'm going to support my kids going to college. I'm going to support my kids getting into tech, because it's cool when I'm hanging out with my friends to tell them my kid's going to be a computer programmer or a graphic designer or whatever. And the trades just kind of put their head down, put their earmuffs on, and ignored it and said, people are still going to love the trades. Remember in the 30s when all those guys are having lunch, sitting on that steel beam, and it was really cool, and kids they still want to do that. And I think what happened was they put their head down for too long. And now parents are looking and say, no kid of mine's going to be a smelly plumber. No kid of mine's going to work outside and do unsafe work where they could get hurt or die. No kid of mine is going to sit behind a truck all day, a windshield all day, and go into strangers' houses and do that. Like, that's not cool for me. So you have a whole generation of parents who are looking at the opportunities for their kids and where they're guiding them and saying, my kids aren't going to trades because that's not something I enjoy telling my friends about. I want my friends to know that I raised my kids with a good head on their shoulder, and they're going into tech, and they're going to work from home, and they're going to get to travel, and they're going to get to be parts of startups because that's what's cool. And I think that is why it became so difficult to recruit for the trades, because the parents are not letting the kids know about these jobs. They're not sending them to these types of job fairs. They're not talking to them about this. They're sending them to college to go into these white collar jobs that are perceived as being more glamorous.
Do you think there's, is it partly a challenge with our education system here as well? Because in Germany, my understanding is that, they have, I studied German in college. It's been years and years and years ago. So it may not be the case this way anymore. But, they made a decision pretty early on, based on aptitude and interests and abilities to help guide students toward one direction or the other, whether it was, getting ready to go to college and go into engineering or science or whatnot, or to go into the trades. We've not wanted to do that in this country because nobody wants to hear that their kid's not going to be the next Einstein.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it is in Canada, but there's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody can be,
Mm-hmm.
And so, but, the highest paid job in most states, I believe, is an over-the-road truck driver.
Mm.
They make $100,000 a year. Now, it's a tough job, but when you compare that to a starting salary of a teacher in Missouri, where they're getting 24, 26,000 a year, it's not as glamorous as everybody always thinks it is. So I think there's a big perception issue too.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's predominantly what's going on, is the perception issue. We talk a lot about how these high schoolers can come into an apprenticeship program and in 4 years be a master electrician making $80,000 to $100,000 a year with no school debt at all. Whereas that teacher has got $80,000 of school debt and they're going to make 30 grand a year. They're never going to get out of that debt.
Yeah.
And so I do think that the education system is causing some issues. I won't get too much in the education soapbox, but they started canceling shop and auto class and all these classes where kids get to work with their hands. And they said, we don't have the funding for that because we need to have funding for programming and some of these the arts and those kinds of things, because that's what the kids need to focus on. So I think it starts real early on where we removed all of those shop classes from the high schools. And then so because nobody has those skills or is interested in those jobs, the colleges, why would they have degree programs for that? Kids aren't even asking for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan, I think those are some really good points. I read an article, matter of fact, just about a week or two ago where they were talking about this same thing. And they said that, you come out of college, 4-year degree, you can have $200,000 in debt. Whereas in the trade, you can go into an apprenticeship program, like you said, you're making money while you're learning. And then in 4 years, you can be making 85, 90, 100,000. That's a $400,000 different. You don't have this $200,000 in debt, and you've been making money during that 4 years, and you can make 85, 90, 100,000 in the trades.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. But there's no one out there pushing that message. I mean, there's a few of us, right? I'm doing it. Mike Rowe's doing it. There's a few of us, but we need more people pushing that message. And I can't tell you how many medium-sized construction companies or contractors that I talk to. They're like, oh, nobody's going to join the apprenticeship program anyways, so why build one? And it really is the chicken or the egg. Well, no one's going to join it if you don't have one.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about, feel for the small business owner getting all the way for a couple of applicants, scheduling them for an interview, and then it turns out that they ghost them.
Yeah.
How can companies overcome that scenario?
We talk about ghosting a lot right now. So the average time for a contractor, now we can only do this if someone's using software to help them with recruiting. We can't do it for everybody, but I can tell you the numbers. If you're investing the money and the resources into an applicant tracking system, which is the software to help with this, your numbers are probably better than the people that aren't. The average is almost 7 days from the time someone applies to the time they hear from you. Now, how many of you marketers would be okay if you generated a hot lead for a client and they let it sit in their inbox for 7 days? And then they're like, your marketing doesn't work. It's way too hard to get customers.
Yeah.
Right? It would never fly.
Yeah.
And so I hate to say this because I don't want it to seem like we're in kindergarten, but who ghosted who first when it took you 7 days to reply?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then people always ask me, well, what's a good time? And I'm going to ask you all a question right now. How long do you think someone should let a hot lead sit in their inbox before they pick up the phone and call them?
30 seconds.
Hey, I was going to give them 15 minutes, but hey, let's go with 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And which is easier to get right now? Customer leads or recruits? Applications, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, speed of response is critical for closing business. It's going to pertain just like as much, or maybe even more so, in a highly competitive, very tight job market.
mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to be fast. It's 7 days. By the time you call that person, they've had a job for two or three already. Like they already went to someone who called them before you did.
Yeah.
And in commercial cleaning, the commercial or residential cleaning, the worst 13 and a half days.
Wow.
That's the worst stat I've seen so far. 13 and a half days.
That's crazy.
If you're making 15, 16, 18 bucks an hour, you don't have 13 days to wait. You got rent due. You got bills to pay. If you need a job, you don't have 13 days to start the process. Really start thinking about what your candidate experience looks like.
Wow, that's amazing.
And disheartening at the same time. Ryan, where companies normally do the Indeeds. I don't even know what all the job application sites are now. I've been out of that for a little while, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the most common thing I hear our clients doing. But is that where companies should be finding good people, or are there other places?
Definitely other places. So only about, depending on the time, 3 to 5% of the job market is on the job boards. And when, like in the States right now, we have 3% unemployment, 3.5% unemployment. And there is a certain percentage of the population that just does not want to be employed. And we passed that a long time ago. It's probably like 5-6%. So we're hiring people now that really don't want to work, but they're doing it for whatever reason. And so we tell people you need to be on the job boards because that's what allows you to hire the people that need to work today. So if you've got a position you need to tomorrow, you got to go to the job boards because those are people ready to go. But a full 70% of the job market is what I call a passive job seeker. They're open to work for someone else, but they're not going to go out there and play the game and fight for it. They're going to call a friend and say, hey, how's that new job you took? They're going to Google it and spend some time on your social media site and go, wow, this looks like a company I want to go work at. Like employers spend so much time promoting all their services. That company party that you just had, and you took some really cool pictures of people having fun, put that on social media. Let people know that this is a fun place to work.
Yeah.
But I think the number one place, and most people will agree, the number one thing you need to be putting your efforts toward if you don't want to be on the job boards is a really solid employee referral program. Employee referrals have a better retention rate. They're more productive quicker. They've already got a friend at work, which according to Gallup is one of the top ways to tell if someone's engaged. Do they like the people they work with? So instead of putting all that energy and giving the money towards Indeed to post these ads, give the money to your people.
Yeah.
If you're going to use money for it. And we actually coach in our program not to use money as a reward for your employee referrals. But if you are, figure out what you're spending on Indeed. We have a client right now hiring entry-level $12, $14 an hour positions, believe it or not. And they spend almost $600 to hire one of these people. What does $600 mean to someone making $14 an hour?
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to make some phone calls for you. Like, why not give it to your people?
Yeah.
And now if I work for you and I refer my friend, what are the odds I'm going to leave? Much lower because I got a friend at work.
So do you actually recommend helping script that, those conversations out for the employees?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We like to equip them with video and social media posts that they can share.
Okay.
One of the easiest ways to do it. And then we teach them how to develop a process we call the core story. And that's what you teach your employees. Like, this is who we are. This is what we stand for. This is what we believe. And that's going to attract people way more than, hey, we're hiring for $15 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
The stat you shared there, Ryan, about the hidden job market, basically, it reminds me of when I was getting into the job market way back in the day. And I was coached to read What Color Is Your Parachute, right?
Oh, yeah.
And even then, like, that's a while ago now, they were saying the same thing. And it sounds like it hasn't really changed, right? We need to, if you're a job seeker, you need to look harder and in more places and make connections. And if you're an employer, you need to think out of the box and really just what you said, equip your team to equip and reward your team for finding great people.
As an employer, it's important to remember that looking for work is one of life's most stressful events. So if you look at the psychological stressors list, it's always like death of a loved one, terminal health diagnosis, relocation. Looking for work is on the same list as death of a loved one. Like, nobody wants to do it.
Wow.
I thought preparing your taxes was on that list.
What was that?
I thought preparing your taxes was on that list.
It might be, but I promise you right now, it's probably below looking for a job.
Might be.
But you have to think about that. So when you're thinking about who's applying for your jobs and what they're going through. I believe it's our obligation as employers to make that just so easy for them. Take the stress out of it. And that's why we have so many passive job seekers, because if they're passively looking for work, they're not really looking for work.
Yeah.
So,
you may have probably touched on this a little bit already, but yeah, I mean, hiring can be a time-consuming process. So, what are some ways to improve that process and make it less stressful?
well, I think solve the retention issue, and you won't have to hire as much. That's the easy answer. One of the things that I tell people to do is automate a lot of the process. So I tell people automate the important. Right? As what I've learned is when we generate a lead for anybody, whether it's a customer lead or an applicant lead, the time it takes for that first contact is critical. That's the first impression. And what do a lot of people do now? They automate that first contact. So automate. What was that?
You almost have to.
Yeah. Because if you don't, somebody else does, and they're going to win.
Yeah.
And so one of the key tools we tell people to use is an applicant tracking system. Get an applicant tracking system that can automate the follow-up and the follow-through for you so that you don't have to do it. Nobody likes hiring. Even the recruiters in HR are pulling their hair out. They're like, I don't like this. So automate those things that are important. An applicant tracking system, if you don't know, it's just like a CRM, except it connects to the job boards. And instead of having a sales pipeline, you have a recruiting pipeline. And instead of sales or marketing email templates, you have recruiting email templates. It's very similar to CRM, except that it's specifically designed for recruiting. And that's one of the easiest ways to help people who don't want to do this. You can even have the system screen applicants for you. There's ways to automatically disqualify people using some of these systems. So you don't have to screen through hundreds of resumes to find the few that you want.
Good.
Brian,
Yeah.
one of the things sorry, Jen.
No, you go ahead.
I just want to
Please.
ask this. One of the things we're finding, I think all of us are finding, is that marketing has moved into the world of omni-channel messaging. So people, don't just want emails, or they don't just want phone calls. They want to connect with us as businesses, or our clients as businesses, through Facebook Messenger, Instagram, whatever it is, right? Google My Business. Do you see that same trend on the ATS side as well? This hiring CRM side?
The ATS is for small businesses. Do not have any of this technology yet. The one of the big things right now is the AI chatbots. Same with the AI messenger bots. So there are a few big companies out there that are targeting the enterprise for developing this new technology. But you get to have a real conversation with this AI about open jobs, and you can actually apply for a job by conversing with these bots. It's not available yet in the SMB space. And with the amount of setup that goes into developing these bots, I don't know that it really ever will be. Unless someone comes up with, here's a cookie cutter, this is the position you want to hire, here's what you get. But we are talking to people about being present, to have Messenger that people can talk to you about it. So one of the things we do with our clients is everybody's got a little chat bot on their website now, or it maybe connects to a customer service team somewhere. So one of the fun things that we like to do is we're like, hey, what's it like to work there? Well, you and I both know that the person on the other end of that doesn't actually work for the company. But we want to know what they're going to say, because how many times are they turning away applicants that are shooting them a message through a chat? And 99 times out of 100, they're like, we're here to talk. We actually had one just the other day say, no, we're here just for customer acquisition. Like, you'll have to go to our careers page and check that out. Not even a link to the careers page.
Wow.
So I think if you're going to be there, you have to be there and do it right. It's like, it's almost better to have a Twitter account, or to not have a Twitter account, than it is to have a Twitter account that's last tweet was 3 years ago, right? It's the same thing. It's almost better to not be present on those platforms if you're not going to do it right. But definitely, we talk to people about being present where the people are. So don't be looking for individuals. Look for where the individuals spend their time. Where do they congregate? And I like to say, where are the right ponds to be fishing out of?
We've talked a lot about a lot of different things about recruiting and hiring today. Is there anything that we haven't asked you yet that you want to be sure our audience is aware of?
I think that the number one place where they mess up is not in the recruiting side of it. People can get applications. Sure, they're disappointed with the applications a lot of times, but people know generally how to get it. Post on Craigslist, post on Indeed. All that. But if they don't create that great interview experience, they don't have a really good sales process, if you will, it's all for nothing. So that interview is so critical to connecting with people, letting them know that you're not like the Yahoo they're working for right now, right? Making sure you're having that conversation. Remember, people want to know, they think the grass is greener, and most people regret it. In fact, there was just a study that came out. You heard about that great resignation during the pandemic?
Right.
I forget what it was, but it's like 60% of people that switched jobs regretted the job they took.
Wow.
Yeah. Because they took it because they thought it was going to be better. They thought they were going to have more freedom. They were going to be able to work from home. Well, pandemic got over. And all those people that switched jobs because they thought they were going to work from home, guess what their employers did? Yanked them back to the office. And so make sure that you're really connecting with someone during that interview process. And there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, just like building a sales process, you don't just go Google it and figure it out. Like, it takes a lot of time. But that interview is really the sales process. And if to do it right, they need to be selling you, not you selling them. So the job seeker should be selling the employer. But it's really hard to do that when you're desperate for people.
That's very interesting. That makes me think about something that Ian, that you said. So that parachute book, I read that too. But what that book talks a lot about is, essentially you got to know yourself, know what you really like to do, what you'll put up with, what you won't, that kind of thing. So that helps you, pick the next best job and be able to talk about why you're a good fit in there too. So maybe that's a whole different podcast. We often do this. We often get to the end and we have ideas for other topics for sure.
And just equally important, the employer needs to know who they are, what they value, what's important to them. Yeah. If you don't know that as the employer, how are you going to guide anybody else through that?
Yeah. So Ryan, I have one other question. We've got some clients that are operating as subcontractors, so their rates are effectively fixed, and yet they're seeing the demand for salaries really increase. But it's not just that they can't just easily go. I mean, they have to actually work through a prime contractor to get a rate increase. Do you have any recommendations on how a business in those types of situations can still be effective at bringing on new employees?
Well, the first response to that's going to seem kind of obvious, but make sure all future contracts have built-in increases. Peg it to a cost of living index or some kind of index, so that you can say, hey, as rate pay goes up, inflation, whatever, we can pass on more. So I mean, that's probably the easy answer. But for those that are in there and they are stuck, here's what I'll tell you: go talk to your primes. If you have a good relationship with them, I promise you, they would rather pay you more to know that they could get the job done than to keep the rates the same. And you're like, we're going to be 6 weeks behind because we don't have enough people. Go have the conversation. It's amazing how few people want to talk right now. Like, let's have a conversation.
Right.
We had a client that they would get behind on schedule because they didn't have enough people, and they had a prime, and there was nothing they can do to change hey, we need more money so we can go hire better people. So what they did was they went to them and they say, here's the deal. We're short. Everybody in the industry short. You know that if you switch now, it's just going to set you back even further. And they said, no, we need to stay on the schedule. And they're like, all right, well, we've been doing that for you, and we've been burning through our margin because we have been doing a ton of OT.
Yeah.
So here's what we're going to do. It wasn't part of my agreement. I'll give you 5 hours of OT per guy per week. Anything over that, you pay for. And they're like, done. They're so worried that the prime is going to come back and say no.
Yeah.
They said that's totally worth it to get the project back on schedule.
Yeah.
And so we saw their overtime costs just, I mean, they plummeted like 90% from one year to the next.
Wow.
It's overtime because he just went and had the conversation.
Well, and if you're the prime, I would think almost every prime that's out there would rather their subs be proactive in letting them know issues that are starting to cause them challenges so that they can jointly work out a solution
Absolutely.
that's best for both of them. I mean, it's, as you said, I mean, you know, the subcontractors right now, they also have a decent amount of control over their situation, even as a subcontractor, because like you said, if they can't meet the schedule, you know, that's going to reflect poorly on the prime if they swap out somebody else. And you're not doing it to hold somebody hostage. You're literally doing it just to facilitate the best possible working relationship that you can have.
Yep.
Yeah, great ideas.
That's great. This sounds like a good place to wrap up today. So Ryan, thanks for joining us. But before we go, where can listeners find out more about you and your company?
So at our website's the easiest, thecorematters.com. It's the easiest place to find out. But if you just search for me, I've done a lot in the marketing space to make myself very easy to find, but it's Ryan Englin, Englin. If you want to learn more about me, or you can go to thecorematters.com and learn about our program. We've got a free masterclass that anybody can sign up for to not just learn more about what's going on and what we have to do as employers to solve it, but also how we can help you do that as well through our training programs.
Okay.
That's fantastic. Thanks everyone for joining us today. If you found value in today's show, please share it, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Brian, thanks everyone. Longest outro ever.
It's taking forever.
It's happening.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's processing.
Okay. Now we go to the bloopers, I guess.